Ribeye, the upper rib section of a cow, a muscle so lazy it barely moves. And that laziness, that's exactly what makes it extraordinary. When muscle doesn't work, fat moves in. It threads itself through the meat in tiny rivers, a process called marbling. Ribeye sizzles louder than every other steak. You're literally hearing the fat melt in real time. No other steak does that. In the 1800s, American butchers figured out that this one cut needed almost nothing. No marinade, no sauce, no tricks. Cook it to 130 degrees, medium rare, and those fat rivers liquefy into something rich, buttery, and so savory. That's why it became the backbone of the American steakhouse for decades, and still the most ordered cut in the country. Sirloin, a story that's almost too good to be true. English folklore claims that King Henry VIII, the same man who had 2 of his wives executed, once sat down to a good steak, was so overwhelmed by it that he stood up, drew his sword, and knighted the cut on the spot. Sirloin, he supposedly declared. Historians call it fiction. It comes from the rear back of the cow, section that actually gets used, which means the muscle fibers are tighter and firmer than ribeye. Less fat, more structure. The flavor is clean and direct. No performance, no excess. Cook it to medium around 140 to 145 degrees, and it holds together beautifully. Slices clean, seasons well, shows up in everything from a simple weeknight dinner to a high-end carving station. Filet Mignon is the most expensive and most fragile steak because the tenderloin muscle, buried deep under the spine, completely shielded from movement, does almost nothing its entire life. Zero strain, zero resistance, which means it never develops the dense muscle fibers that give other cuts their chew. It stays impossibly soft, almost disturbingly soft. The kind of soft that makes people stop mid-bite and just look at their plate. French chefs discovered this in the 19th century and named it Filet Mignon, means cute filet. By the early 1900s, it was the centerpiece of Parisian fine dining, a symbol of luxury. Because of no fat filet, mignon needs help. A compound butter, herbs, and a little bit of your favorite seasoning. T-bone is actually 2 steaks. That bone running through the center, shaped exactly like a T, divides the cut into 2 completely different muscles. One side is strip steak, firm, bold, full of beefy intensity. The other side is tenderloin, soft, delicate, almost buttery. You're cooking both simultaneously on the same piece of meat over the same fire. It became an icon of American grill culture in the mid-20th century precisely because of how it looks. Bone-in, wide, unmistakable. It's a steak that announces itself before you even cut into it. Medium rare across both sides. Every single bite is a shift between 2 completely different textures. New York strip steak. In 1827, a man named Giovanni Delmonico opened a small cafe on William Street in Lower Manhattan. It eventually became Delmonico's restaurant, widely recognized as the first fine dining establishment in American history. And the steak they put on the menu, the one that wealthy New Yorkers kept coming back for, was the strip. It carried the city's name out of that restaurant and into steakhouses across the world. It comes from the short loin, right next to where the tenderloin sits in the T-bone. Firm muscle, visible fat cap along the edge, and a flavor that doesn't need an introduction. Cook it medium rare, 130 to 135 degrees, and that fat cap renders into a crisp, almost crackly edge while the interior stays tender and deeply savory. Flank steak. For most of the 20th century, flank steak was what you bought when you couldn't afford anything else. Budget cut. Tough, chewy, the kind of meat that showed up in economy cookbooks with apologetic headnotes. Flank comes from the lower belly, one of the hardest working muscles on the animal. That constant movement creates a long, aggressive grain running through the meat. 4 to 8 hours in an acidic marinade, citrus or vinegar, then a screaming hot pan or grill, 450 degrees minimum, pulling it at medium rare and cutting it thin. Tender, juicy, intensely flavorful in a way that more expensive cuts can't match. One of the most flavorful steaks you can buy. Also one of the cheapest. The only thing standing between you and a perfect flank steak is knowing how to cut it.